How's it going, and welcome to my wrap-up video on Chapter 2 of the 5th edition module, Icewind Dale, Rime of the Frostmaiden. In this video, I'm just going to go ahead and give a quick little overview about the chapter, and give you some of my final thoughts, give you some of my highs and some of the lows, and, just a quick little glimpse of all of the super-duper in-depth extreme videos that I've already done. This, of course, is going to contain a lot of spoilers, so if you are planning on playing on this module, do not watch this. But if you are a DM and you just want to go ahead and see my final thoughts on this chapter, then go ahead and stick around. So here we are, Chapter 2, Icewind Dale, the namesake, essentially, of this book. This takes your players all across the icy north and is going to have your players going to pretty extreme locations, meeting various peoples and doing various things. But the thing is your players, while they may be going to a very, very wide variety of places, there seems to be a common theme between a lot of these places, and it's the fact that the dungeons aren't really dungeons. I make this joke to my friends all the time, but Dungeons and Dragons is sort of just a name. Your players typically don't go up against dragons all the time. And in this module in particular, your players actually don't end up going to too many dungeons. Your players, of course, are going to be going to exciting places, mind you. They will be meeting new peoples. They'll be going to exciting locations. Some of them I really appreciate and really love the theme, and I really dig all of the aesthetics that are going on. Some of them fall a little bit short in my book, and some of them need a lot of work. I'm looking at you, Ragged Tribe Camp. My goodness, there's just so many things you can do with the Ragged Tribe, and they left it purely up to us DMs. But before I get ahead of myself here, let's go ahead and just quickly talk about the chapter itself. This chapter just purely involves your players trekking around all of the frozen north. It involves all these random encounters your players can be getting into, and it involves all of the awesome places that your players want to go to. Now, I say want to go to, but the thing is why do they want to go to? That really depends on the adventure that you're selling. If you're selling the adventure as, hey, you just go ahead and do whatever you want, you're in a sandbox, then for sure your players are probably going to want to go somewhere and do something other than just sit around and do nothing all day. But if you sell this adventure as, oh, O'Reil's going to freeze over the world, oh, and the Duergar, this phantom menace that are floating around this place, then your players are probably not going to be that interested in actually going places. They're probably going to be more interested in the big bads that are floating around this place. So you are going to have to sit here and consider, what are you trying to sell this adventure as? If you are running this adventure as just a sandbox where your players run around for some time until eventually you thrust the quest upon them, then this works. But if you're running this adventure as right from the get-go, something's afoot and your players have to be the ones to stop it, then you're going to have to throw in a lot of your own hooks to get your players going places. What business do your players have to go to Revel's End if the Duergar are this presence all around and your players are having to deal with the Duergar? Why would your players go all the way down to Carcolok there in the corner that's covered by my face? Why would they go there if, O'Reil's frozen nature is just destroying all of the land? These things you are going to have to come up with, and some of them might be a bit of a stretch, but other times they don't necessarily have to be. You could go ahead and spread some rumors that there possibly could be some magical items running around the place, and this will arm the party to get your players ready to go. Your players could be going to all these random locations to meet some friends and have these friends fight with them later on in the future. Much like the Goliaths and the Goblins and, heck, even possibly the Gnome Ceramorphs. Who knows? So just always keep into consideration what this adventure means to both you and your players, because that's something very important. You might have this perception of how this adventure is going to go, but your players are going to have a way different idea. Be transparent with them. Talk to them. Figure out what they are thinking, because if they're only thinking it and not telling it, you're probably going to be on one track and they're going to be on another track, and both of y'all are just going to be lost. And speaking of getting lost, this is definitely the chapter where I know for a fact every single DM is going to handle the overland travel differently. And this overland travel will, of course, include how your players move from location to location, but also the encounters that they have along the way. Quite frankly, encounters in 5th edition are meaningless if they go ahead and just sleep right after the fight, because there is no lingering injuries, you get everything back on a long rest, you get, everything up. So having encounters and then your players just going ahead and sleeping, that's not going to add anything to the adventure. In fact, that's just going to take away from the adventure because you're wasting time doing all these battles instead of going to all these fun locations. So if you are going to do these random encounters, you probably should have a variance on resting, or your players arrive at a location and they are battered from whatever encounter they just came through. But once again, that ties back into the adventure that you're selling. If you are running this hardcore epic survival and they're going up against not only the elements but also the monsters that are roaming around this place, for sure, live it up. Throw those encounters in there. But if your players showed up to the table thinking that they were going to exciting locations and meeting with strange denizens, go ahead and run this module as a flavor of the week. Go ahead and just have it where one session your players are going to the Jarlmood, next session your players are going to the Black Cabin, next session they're going to the Cave of the Berserkers, and that keeps it fresh and interesting. It makes it feel like your players are having a series of one-shots, but they actually get character development, and that is fun. But no matter how you run this adventure, whether it be flavor of the week, hardcore survival, a mix between, maybe none of these, it doesn't matter because eventually you're probably going to want to thrust the adventure on them. You're going to want to throw chapters 3 on them, and then that's going to lead to 4, 5, and 6, and beyond. So throughout this entire chapter, is there any foreshadowing about the future to come? Not really. In fact, in Chapter 2, your players don't interact with Durgar ever. In Chapter 2, there is one whole instance of your players going up against an agent of O'Reilly's, and that's located in the quest to Jarlmoot, and your players don't even necessarily get that quest to go to Jarlmoot. So there is a pretty decent lack of foreshadowing in this chapter. In fact, almost all of the foreshadowing comes from one of my favorite locations, the Lost Spire of Netheril, but I'll be getting to my favorites and least favorites in a moment. So if you're relying on Chapter 2 to feed into the future chapters, you're probably going to be disappointed here, and you're probably going to want to go ahead and add some stuff of your own. If you want to foreshadow the future to come, then you're probably going to want to have some Durgar showing up to some of the locations, or maybe just having their presence known. You may want to have some Dwarven footprints roaming around whatever location your players are looking for. Maybe you add a lot more black ice, a lot more Chardalyn around this location, and clearly show that the Chardalyn is getting mined, and it's clearly going somewhere. Foreshadowing the future to come is way better than having your players just blindsided by seemingly nothing. And I harp on this so much, but go ahead and get that Arcane Brotherhood in here. Even if they are just mere showcases, just for like a moment, have the players interact with the Arcane Brotherhood. Maybe just have the Arcane Brotherhood members say something to them real quick in regards of, oh, hey, you know, what's going on? And at least your players get to meet these characters before all of a sudden all the crazy shenanigans go down. Because as we'll get to in the Chapter 3, Chapter 4 plot, Velen Harpel just shows up out of nowhere and says, hey, we gotta go, let's go. And then your players are supposed to go with this woman and go all the way to the middle of the sea. And once you guys go to the sea, then you're going to find a body of someone that you don't even know and you probably wouldn't care about because you don't know them. And then potentially down the line, your players will go ahead and meet an albino tiefling who more than likely your players didn't actually meet because she's locked away in a castle right now. And more often than not, most people aren't going to go storming the castle. But the saving grace of Chapter 2 is the fact that we do get to meet one of the Arcane Brotherhood members, though he is not the actual Arcane Brotherhood member. He is a simulacrum of this guy, and he can potentially be brought back to life. But man, just get them in there. Just throw them in there. Get some seeds growing in there. Maybe have them offhandedly mention, oh yeah, you know, we're looking for something big here. Oh, maybe this will help out with O'Reilly. Maybe we'll find a really good haul of magical items if we can go somewhere, you know. Just have these things mentioned because that is going to foreshadow your players going to the Lost City, and it's going to be epic once they finally arrive. So in essence, Chapter 2 really doesn't have too much actual story beat going on in regards to the rest of the module. But the thing is your players presumably aren't going to just go out into the wilderness and stay out in the wilderness forever. They're more than likely going to be heading back to the 10 towns and splurging on whatever they need to survive and interacting with the people that they like and, you know, just avoiding the cold for a little bit of time. So keep that in your mind that this world is changing, this world is moving, and things are getting worse day by day. So by the time your players arrive back in town, maybe things have changed. Maybe that favorite NPC they like has moved over to another town to try and avoid all the creepy stuff that's going on. Maybe one of their favorite NPCs is getting cooked up in that lottery there. Who knows? Make the 10 towns feel organic in alongside your players traveling outside to the wilderness because Mind you, traveling out in the wilderness, if you run it purely as written, takes a tremendous amount of time. Even if you don't run it purely as written, it still probably takes a decent amount of time. Your players are going out, and let's say they go to, good old Lost Spire of Netheril here, all the way from Caraconic. That's 13 miles. That's a pretty big haul, honestly. And by the time they get there, they get into some fights. They're going to spend the night there. They're going to come back. That's a whole day gone, and then that's also more time as they go back to the other 10 towns. Keep the 10 towns moving. Like I said, for the places of interest, there's some good ones in here, there's some okayish ones in here, and sadly there's some where they are going to require a lot of DM prep and just DM foresight into how to actually run these things. My favorite location in all of Chapter 2 is the Lost Spire of Netheril. And the reason why I like it so much is because it harps on the 3 pillars of Dungeons and Dragons. There is combat, there is exploration, and there is roleplay. Your players get to combat some weird things that are going on in here. Your players get to explore around an upside down tower, which, that theme is just cool. Your players are walking around an upside down place. And your players get to meet this guy who is a simulacrum, and you get to meet his undead assistant bodyguard. That is cool, and the Lost Spire has a lot of foreshadowing in it. In there, your players can find some books, and these books are great for foreshadowing. They talk about the Netheril. They talk about becoming a brain in the jar. They talk about these horrific monsters that lie underground. And it talks about even one of the other cities having been sabotaged and crashing down into the world below. So if your players explore around the Lost Spire and they talk to Dazan and they get to interact with all the things in there, it is just a really fun time. And that is, in fact, a really good one-shot design. I'm totally going to use that as a one-shot template at some point in my future. My least favorite location in Chapter 2, it is pretty almost tied with the Ragged Tribes and with Revel's End, because of those two in particular, they are so much lost potential because we get some information on it, but we get no information on how to actually run any of them. We don't get any information on like what to do with them or any of that nature. It's just basically a template that you have to fill out yourself. But the dishonorable mention goes to the Cave of the Berserkers. And the reason for that is I like the dungeon's design. I like the map itself. I like the fact that there's 2 dragons that go ahead and jump the party. I like that. And I like the Cave Berserkers theme as well. I like the fact that they're crazy. I like how they're these guys that just attack all the time and they don't care. But the thing is it is really hard to telegraph to your players that, hey, these people cannot die, and that you have to mechanically work that out. I never introduce characters that can't die because that is just lame. You can't have, NPCs run around with a crown over their head and all of a sudden you beat them up and they, fall unconscious. That's not how D&D works. At any given point, any character should be able to die for any reason. Mind you can go ahead and slap a big old health pool on something and it makes it a lot harder. But telling your players, hey, this thing cannot die, is just miserable. And it's not going to be just miserable for your players because they're going ahead, slogging away against these berserkers in this cave and they can't die. No, the worst part about it is you have to somehow tell your players this information, but at the same time not give away the whole motif of the cave that they have to deal with this brazier. Because if you tell your players straight up from the get-go, oh yeah, you got to deal with this brazier, then what was the point of ever coming here? If you're going to go ahead and just meta it and just tell your players, hey, you have to do it this one way and that's it, that just sucks. One thing I should have totally mentioned when I was doing the Cave of the Berserkers, if you're doing it, just go ahead and let them fall unconscious if they drop down to 0 HP. And tell your players like, oh yeah, this guy falls unconscious and he's sleeping, but you can't kill him. Even if you try and cut his head off, it just regrows. If you try and burn him, his skin repairs back to normal, etc., etc. That would be a lot better than just telling your players, oh yeah, this guy's still standing, what are you going to do about it? Because that just sucks. All in all, Chapter 2 has a lot of changing themes, and I like that about it. It is very unique. Your players can go to a cabin where they get blown up. Your players can go to a giant's meeting place and interact with some ghosts. Your players can go to a Goliath area. Your players can go to a lost piece of an ancient city. There's just so many things going on here, and they're all so unique and so flavorful. It just works really well that your players can have so much spice and variety in this campaign. But like I said, you gotta sow those seeds, you gotta get your players ready for the future to come, because you probably want your players to go ahead and get themselves involved in chapters 3 and beyond. My players had a ton of fun going to a lot of these locations. Sadly, they didn't get around to going to all these locations, but you probably shouldn't send all of your players to all these locations, because if you have your players going to every single one of these locations, that's going to be a tremendous amount of time in this campaign. Holy guacamole. So just play it how you desire. Play up how much you want your players to go to. Allow your players to level up as they go ahead and explore around. And once you feel like they're ready and you're tired of your players going left, right, and center, go ahead and push Chapter 3 on them. So go ahead and tell me, how do you like Chapter 2? Do you like a lot of these locations? Do you not like a lot of these locations? Do you like some more than others? Go ahead and tell me. Have any of your players been to any of these locations and they are ranting and raving about it? I love hearing that stuff. I love hearing how players enjoy the bejesus out of a certain location. When my players went to Engajuk Spell, they actually got to talk to Engajuk, and it was a blast. They got to talk to this whale. There was 2 players in the party that could actually talk to the whale in its own native tongue, and that made the whale feel special, that he got to talk to people in his own language, That was pretty cool. So go ahead and tell me all that stuff, because I really want to know, and I want to hear all about the great stuff coming out of this campaign, because I think this campaign's awesome, but like I said, needs a lot of DM elbow grease. That is going to do it for me. My next video will be covering the Chapter 3/Chapter 4 intro, because my god, is that a doozy. So many people are going wild over the whole destruction of 10 towns thing, and I'm going to go into super detail on how we can go ahead and change that up, because as per written, as we'll be getting into, 10 towns is kind of screwed. But the best way to look forward to that is by subscribing to me. Only 30% of my viewers are subscribed to me, and that just hurts my poor, poor, frail heart. So go ahead and subscribe and like and comment and make me feel not so sad in the heart anymore. But that is going to do for me for this video. Thank you all for watching, and have a good time.